Passengers who arrive by plane in the western Russian city of Pskov may not be aware that in June 2019, the airport was renamed in honour of a bloodthirsty Viking princess. The rebranding of the two-storey concrete building, a former military base, was described as a great historical awakening by officials and the local bishop. Olga, also called Olha or Helga in the Scandinavian tongue of her ancestors, born in a nearby village around AD 1890, is now fated as the true precursor of the Christian faith among the Eastern Slavs. Olga was the wife of Prince Igor, a Norseman and one of the first great leaders of the medieval state called Kievan Rus. Rus derives from the Old Norse word roa, which means to row. Over time, these formidable oarsmen, the Rus, assimilated with the indigenous population. They set off from eastern Sweden, travelling up the Neva River, where they acquired furs and slaves from the Slavs, Finnic and other tribes of the north, before transporting their cargo along waterways to the south, and then across the Black Sea to markets in Byzantium and the Arab caliphates. Kievan Rus came into existence in the 9th century and was based around present-day Kiev. Long before the rise of Moscow in the 1100s, it was the heart of Slav religion and culture. According to early chronicles, Finnic and East Slavic tribes were constantly fighting each other and incapable of self-rule. So in 862, they invited Rurik and his fellow Scandinavian warriors to come to the city of Novgorod and impose order on the political chaos. His successor, Oleg, moved the seat of power to Kiev in 882 and extended his domain south towards the Byzantine Empire. At its greatest extent, Kievan Rus ruled an area stretching from the White Sea in the north to the Black Sea in the south, and from the headwaters of the Vistula in the west to the Taman Peninsula in the east. The modern nations of Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine all have Kievan Rus as their cultural ancestors. Despite frequent trade with different Christian nations, Rus was officially pagan. Then one woman changed the status quo, a woman who is now venerated in churches, town squares and monasteries across the Orthodox world, even if she remains a figure of relative obscurity in Western churches. Grand Princess Olga's path to sainthood was strewn with corpses. After her husband Igor was murdered by a rebellious forest tribe called the Drevlians, she took her revenge. Before Igor's body was cold, the head of the tribe, Prince Mal, put himself forward as Olga's new husband. Unimpressed, she buried and burned some of his emissaries alive. Then she hosted a funeral banquet for her husband and invited the Drevlian soldiers to join her at the table. Once the guests were drunk on mead, she ordered her troops to slit their throats, all 5,000 of them. The scene is described in the Tale of Bygone Years, also known as the Primary Chronicle. It's a detailed account of the early history of the Eastern Slavs and was compiled by 3 generations of Kievan monks using Byzantine texts, Slavonic literary sources and oral sagas. The chronicle makes for a racy read, even if many details are hard to corroborate and often seem exaggerated for the sake of storytelling. Olga's final act of retribution was to burn down all of the thatched houses of the Drevlian capital using her airborne troops, thousands of pigeons and sparrows who had rags soaked with sulphur attached to their legs.